A little while ago, I was making a video about writing this next bit on the topic of cognitive biases because I have quite a bit written, and I have quite a bit written on the topic of language and a little bit about information and memetics. And my plan was to finish up writing this, and it might still be because that was what I was talking about in the last video, was writing and not using ChatGPT to edit it or make it better so that I can preserve my voice. And part of the reason being to put it into ChatGPT eventually to train another custom ChatGPT, which I did before when I had the subscription, but I don't have the subscription anymore. So this is how quickly things can shift, because after I finished the video, I was sort of looking at this information and it seems a bit arduous to go through it all in the way I was planning to. Partly because I wrote this stuff on cognitive biases related to bipolar years ago. So I'm seeing a lot of similar things and different things already. And for example, I was going to just put the proper definition and then write a blurb and edit the blurb below. And so even just doing that seems like a lot of work, like getting self-fulfilling prophecy separated. And then when I was looking for self-fulfilling prophecy in the list of cognitive biases on Wikipedia, it's not even on here. It might be called something else. And then not only that, I had the Pygmalion effect under self-fulfilling prophecy, like as something similar. And then when I looked at it this time, Pygmalion effect is actually quite different. It is, it's how others' expectations affect a person. So this is actually an effect that is similar to the clinical gaze. So I had that totally wrong. So just going through all of it, it's, yeah, and then I mentioned it again in here. So here it is. Now I put it in, I put in psychiatry biases, which I have some of the cognitive biases that relate to psychiatry. So there's a few different possible strategies here. It's like just leave this as it is and still use it to train the AI, which is something I wasn't planning to do for a while, but maybe I do want to, you know? Because part of it too, when I was looking at this and I'm like, oh, do I really have to go through all this? Then I was realizing, well, I can, but if I go through it with AI, it might be more engaging than not with AI, not with ChatGPT. Just going through it to edit like an old school process might be kind of boring. But maybe I can make it the way I wanted it, like post it and not use ChatGPT stuff, but just by still using ChatGPT to some degree. And I'll show you what I mean. But before we go into that, I want to show what else I started, and this is because I was talking about it in the last video as well, which is the idea of going back to these dialogues I had with ChatGPT a long time ago, which is when I had it with the original custom GPT that I made. And so I just took the first question that I asked here, however long ago, I can't remember. What are the positive aspects of bipolar? So here it talks about creativity and artistic talent, energy and enthusiasm, empathy and sensitivity, resilience and adaptability, heightened perception and intuition, drive and ambition. Yeah, and so just reading through this, which I'm not going to read through all of it, is like, for example, resilience and adaptability. Living with bipolarity can foster a great deal of resilience. Individuals learn to navigate their highs and lows, which can cultivate a strong sense of adaptability and problem solving. And then when I ask the question here, what are the positive aspects? It says, so it still says resilience and adaptability, but the definition is a little bit more nuanced. It says many people learn to navigate uncertainty, making them adaptable in unpredictable situations, rather than talking about like the typical highs and lows. So I thought, maybe that's the same thing, and it's just saying it in a different way. But so it's hard. I find it hard to go back and forth like this, but it looks like ability to see patterns and big picture thinking, and also courage and willingness to explore the unknown, potential for transcendent and mystical experiences. So like these are a lot more next level, I would say, than these. And the funny thing is that I'm asking ChatGPT, and it's just regular ChatGPT for everyday tasks. So this was when I asked ChatGPT, and it was based on my custom GPT, where I put some of my content in, like quite a lot. And this is the answer it gave. And then however long later, and I haven't really been using ChatGPT much, here it's giving like a super nuanced and interesting response. And it's also relating that to how it can be beneficial in a lot of different things. Not just like, one's own life, but say science, arts. Here it does that a little bit too. So I was just surprised by that. This is how all of a sudden the course of my exploration can change so quickly. One moment I'm saying, oh yeah, I could re-ask these questions to see the difference. And then the next moment I'm realizing just with the regular ChatGPT, without the subscription, it is quite good. Like this isn't even supposed to be the most powerful one. And it's answering like it knows me because, and it does, like it does. That was the other thing. When I asked these questions back in the day, it sounds like it's so long ago. It wasn't that long ago. Once you close the chat, or once you got to the end of how many queries you could ask, it didn't remember anything. And so that was a little frustrating. But it, like I said before, I think that just having this as a kind of a funny baseline from before, and having the new power of it shows that it's quite smart. And I already thought that before, and now I'm just seeing, basically I'm like, I don't know if I want to keep exploring all this by myself, and using AI as a way not to have to do that. So this was another question here, which is really interesting. I did ask this question: how can I adapt to mania? So here, it says practice embodied cognition, develop awareness and safety strategies, alchemize the experience, focus on flow, shift your narrative, self-dialogue, rest and recovery. All these are good. But let's see what it says now. Oh, this was the clue that it's definitely, this was a fresh chat, And it refers to one of my neologisms, which is Gaiance, which is Gaia plus science. It's sort of the art and science of knowing things without knowing how you know. Basically because you're not projecting knowledge into the situation. So the situation can tell you something. It can show you something that you didn't know because you're not approaching the moment through knowing. So anyways, it definitely remembers across everything. And that made me feel like my ChatGPT account for myself basically is my own custom GPT. It's my own custom GPT. And then if I wanted to share that with others, I would create a custom GPT, which would be similar as well. But just made me really realize that, now it's learning from the conversations, meaning what it says and what I say. And if I look at what it says and realizes that's something that I would say, then I realize that I can trust that and just kind of go with that as a way to build it. So what did I ask here? How can I adapt to mania? Oh yeah, so this one said these things: develop awareness, safety strategies, alchemize the experience, focus on flow. So these are all things that are still relevant. But then when I looked at here, it's next level for sure. So it says, recognizing mania as an altered state of knowing, which is interesting because I usually say another way of knowing. That's a really good term, actually, altered state of knowing, because it's like altered state of consciousness. That just sounds a little bit nebulous. But when you say altered state of knowing, that is good. I like that. Instead of viewing mania as a problem, you can see it as an expanded mode of perception. The challenge is to interact with it wisely, allowing insights to emerge without losing ground in daily life. So this is very much representing what I talk about in here. It could even be using my custom GPT's information because it's here. It's just not active, I don't think, because I'll click on it later, but because I don't pay. But it's still, the information's there. And then keep a mania journal where you capture insights and neologisms without feeling the urgency to act on all of them at once. Let them incubate. So that's one of the things I mentioned is, write them down and don't try to act on every single thing or as many things as you can. It's sort of like a brainstorming state. Setting up mania frameworks. I've never used that term in advance. So this is cool, right? Like, this is something that I didn't create. I am working on it though. Pre-mania rules. I didn't think of it as pre-mania rules, but I did create rules. When stable, decide on boundaries, blah, blah, blah. These are kind of neurotypical type boundaries. Like, I created different rules than this. Insight buckets. I call this the harvest template. And I don't have categories like this, but these are good categories, like immediate action, later review, just an interesting thought, right? So just an interesting thought is one thing, and later review immediate. So I like those types of categories too, like time-based categories. And I do talk about that because I say, like, if it's something that needs to be done, do it or put it in your calendar so you don't forget. Schedule cool down times. That can be cool. So integrating the experience with guidance and meaningfulness. Not sure why it's like bringing these things up so much, but it seems to like it. Your concept of guidance involves direct participatory observation without projecting past knowledge. Mania often amplifies this kind of perception, but can become overwhelming. Use meaningfulness, which is one of my terms, as an anchor. Remind yourself that not all moments of mania need to be acted on, but they can be observed. Explore choiceless awareness, which I've talked about with ChatGPT, but that's Krishnamurti's term. Let insights flow without forcing them into immediate conclusions or narratives. So I definitely talk about that, but not necessarily connected to choiceless awareness. But I talk about not believing the insights, because believing them starts to shape them into a narrative, which can make us feel like we need to go down certain paths. Whereas if it's sort of just an interesting thought, that's something else. Grounding practices, building an integration period after mania. So that's a good way to say it. I call it re-uncovery, which is reflecting on insights and things like that. Practical things. Use voice notes instead of writing if your thoughts move too fast for text. Let me see. Avoiding traps. Yeah, so this point is one of my points, that it's subjectively true in the moment, but it's not necessarily long-term true. And that could just be because we don't remember it later, and the fact that there's so many new subjectively true insights. So, holding things long-term is just not something that's majorly a part of mania, but sometimes we can cling on to things, and that can lead to trouble. Like if I keep having insights and I start creating this belief that I'm so godlike or something because of it, then that can lead to a problem. And let's see. Does this insight still feel meaningful in a different state of mind? That's a good question, and it might often take the different state of mind to come about to see that it doesn't. So sometimes I'll write down a lot of insights in mania, and then after I look at them and I'm like, no big deal. But in the moment when it comes through, it feels really meaningful. And aligning mania with your larger vision. Yeah, so design a life that works with your natural cycles. Yeah. States are integrated rather than fought against. Yeah, not all ideas need to be completed. Some are seeds that need to bloom later. So all of this to... being a lighthouse, not a firework. This is interesting. I create a personalized mania navigation guide for yourself. It could outline your specific triggers, cycles, and best adaptive strategies. So some of these are good terms, mania navigation guide, best adaptive strategies, Now, all of this to say that that's a lot different than this, right? It's a different format with some actionable points. So that's nice. Then I wanted to shift and not keep asking the same questions, because I sort of want to get the subscribed version before I ask a lot of questions. Let's see if there's another one, since we're on this topic. Let's see what it knows about re-uncovery, because I don't have the paid version. And so let's just see what it says. Oh, so here it doesn't know. So that's really strange how... I wonder why it's bringing up some terms but it doesn't know the term re-uncovery. Maybe we haven't talked about it, and I have talked about guidance and different things. Well, the interesting thing now would be to, ask the custom GPT, but it still offers some good insights. because it says rediscovering something that was once lost, hidden, or forgotten. Not just uncovering something new, but re-engaging with a deeper, perhaps previously known truth. And the reason I call it re-uncovery is because of this whole thing with this idea of meta-reflection, which is, going back after the state when, it's no longer feels as meaningful, but still going over it and reflecting on it, doing a meta-reflection on what happened and insights and things like that. And let's see. Yeah, so it has this thing in recent memory for some reason about alternative ways of knowing, perception, meaningfulness. I don't know if it's just holding that in mind from recent memory. Reclaiming lost cognitive or perceptual abilities. Well, this is more like looking at the abilities that were there in Mania and finding ways to reclaim parts of it in daily life. As well, let's see what it says here. Healing from imposed frameworks. This is interesting that it sees this insight here about re-uncovery could represent moving beyond the recovery model, which assumes something was broken, towards an uncovery, revealing the innate wholeness that was always there. So that's true. And the cyclical nature of insight. Instead of a linear progress, it might acknowledge that deep understanding comes in cycles. And that's what seems lost. And what seems lost is often re-uncovered in a new light. Much like your idea that truth is a living thing. Well, truth is a living thing is actually Krishnamurti's idea. I don't remember saying that it was mine, but anyway, no, that's good. So I just want to ask to see if it would remember. It seems to be remembering some things. So then I wanted to go into, where is the Dunning-Kruger effect? See, when I look at this stuff on cognitive biases, I see there's a lot here. But to really write well about it would take a lot. Like I've written some stuff that's not that good about it. So I don't even think I understood this one in terms of both senses of the definition, because it says the tendency for unskilled individuals to overestimate their own ability and the tendency for experts to underestimate their own ability. So it's basically a misalignment between ability and estimation of ability. A misalignment. Now, for Mania, it's different in a way. And what I wanted to get at with this one is that, yes, there can be some Dunning-Kruger effect where there can be certain skills a person is unskilled in, and then one can overestimate their own ability. So let's just use an extreme example. In the case where some people, myself included, at one point in my first Mania, I thought I was Jesus. And it's the Messiah complex or whatever, grandiosity. So obviously I'm unskilled at being Jesus. So I was overestimating my ability to be Jesus. And I didn't really think I was Jesus exactly, but I felt like I had some abilities that were similar to what I knew that Jesus was purported to have. And even if I did have some of those abilities for a split second, or I thought I did, I definitely wasn't skilled in those abilities. So that's not the greatest example, but we'll just use that extreme example. Now we'll take another example from my experience. I am a relatively skilled rollerblader or inline skater, just skating outside around on trails and things like paved trails. I can go down hills, but I don't go down big hills because it's not comfortable. So I'm relatively skilled in that. But what happened when I was in my first mania is that my skills and abilities for rollerblading all of a sudden became extreme. I was skating around in ways that I'd never skated before. It was like kind of dancing on skates, and I haven't skated that way again since. So rather than being unskilled and overestimating my ability, I was skilled and I became more skilled. And rather than sitting there overestimating my ability, I actually was just surprised at my ability. So this isn't actually the Dunning-Kruger effect that I'm talking about there. So I don't even know if there is an effect for that. And so in talking about the Dunning-Kruger effect, I said maybe this is part of so-called grandiosity, along with some other biases. I don't know if I should say biases or biases. Biases? I'll just say whatever happens to be said. And then perhaps mania creates a Dunning-Kruger bias, not the equivalent illness symptom. So I don't know what I exactly mean by that, but there is some kind of change that happens in. There's another example where one is unskilled. So say I have no skill in channeling, and then all of a sudden I have the skill of channeling. And it's not that I'm overestimating it, it's actually happening. So this isn't the Dunning-Kruger effect either. It's just having a skill. So there's no, what I'm thinking actually is, I've talked about in a few different posts that the research, in quotes, says that 80% of vision is cognition and 20% of vision is perception of the moment, of what's around and the information that is coming in because of that. And in my feeling, like, the cognitive biases are going on in the 80% of cognition. I don't think all cognition is just cognitive bias, but part of it is. And so when there's the Dunning-Kruger effect isn't happening and other biases aren't happening, then it's possible all of a sudden we do have skills that we never had and we're surprised by them. And the Dunning-Kruger effect does come into play a bit because in mania, there is definitely an overestimation aspect, like in the case of grandiosity. And there can be lots of other examples too. But it's a little different. So that's why it's hard to, that's why I'm using the cognitive biases as extrapolation points to talk about mania, because when I read the bias, I immediately see a lot there, right? Like even a few years ago, I wrote all this just after reading the Dunning-Kruger effect. And it could be sometimes there is a so-called symptom that is resulting from being unskilled and overestimating one's ability. So that could be related to this point here. So in mania, we can overestimate our abilities. Since I don't really know what this means anymore, I'm just going to get rid of it. I just don't like it. So yet at the same time, this overestimation makes us better able to perform the task that we already do, which is not part of the Dunning-Kruger effect where one can't do what one thinks one can. So this, I mentioned my video of the skating here. And now it could be true that if I were to think that since I skated that way that one time, I can do it. Like I'm overestimating my ability because I think I can skate like that again, when I know I certainly can't. So, and another mechanism is it that we just have more energy from the right brain, or the left brain is wasting less energy? So if we imagine that the left brain, the thinking left brain side, is part of where the cognitive biases come from, or a lot of it, then it's kind of wasting energy that could be used for perception. And if we were perceiving, now I don't know how perception relates to all of a sudden being stronger, more agile, more fluid on rollerblades. Like, how does that happen, right? But let's see. So yeah, Krishnamurti talks about that a lot. Who cares right now? In Mania, we're more likely to try something we've never done before and do it better than we expect. Now, we might actually overestimating our ability to do something might be what leads us to try it in the first place. So that I don't have in here, but it's sort of leading. I think that could be a big part of it. Maybe I'll just put space in here for now. So from the perspective of mania, we notice that normal people have the opposite of the Dunning-Kruger effect. I don't know what that means. They have a cognitive bias of illusory inferiority, which I don't know if that's actually a cognitive bias. But what I was trying to say there is that in our normal consciousness, normal in quotes, generally people like underestimate themselves or just don't even try, So to say that it's bad to overestimate your ability, maybe it is if it's really risky, like a risky activity. But other than that, some of us can't even like speak up and talk because we're afraid. So maybe we need a little bit more overestimation to get over this inferiority complex. A lot of these cognitive biases are like saying, if you step up and stand out and think you're special or you can do something, you're just really not, and you should sit down. And the funny part about that is, with what we saw with the Pygmalion effect, is that others' expectations of a target person affect that target person's performance. So if people are looking at you like you can't do this and you're thinking you can, well, you also have to deal with the energy of what others expect of you. And it's hard to overcome that, right? And so how do you overcome that unless you have a bit higher of an estimation? And then even if you do, even if you have the skill, you're working against this energy of how people are gazing upon you. And for me, experiencing mania and bipolar in general, I'm very sensitive to that at times, realizing like how people are looking has an effect. And you might think, well, that sounds nuts. Just take the example of singing in the shower, and say you sing in the shower. I do sometimes. I didn't used to, but more recently I have. And I can sing okay. I don't know if it's the humidity in there or what. But some songs I can sing okay, and it's just singing for fun. Well, you put me in front of a crowd of 10 people or 10, 20 people and ask me to sing that same song, I'm going to sound like heck, like total crap, right? So that's kind of like that. That's sort of the same effect. But in mania, you can almost like feel it. Like, and there's other reasons. Actually, one of them is probably the spotlight effect, when you feel like you're getting more attention than you probably are. But there is some kind of feeling of the attention of others that we're not usually sensitive to. Doesn't mean we're necessarily getting more attention or like we're the center of attention like we might think, but we could be sensing the attention of others. Just like they've done studies where if somebody's staring at you behind you, a lot of people can sense it and then they look. You've probably had that experience where you're like staring at someone and then from behind and then they like turn around and look at you more than once. So again, those are just kind of asides, but they're related to cognitive biases. So, wait a second. Oh, see, this is funny. To me, this is funny. I didn't read this line here. Also, we're more likely to try something we've never done and do it better than we expect. And then I wrote it again here without. That's what happens a lot when I write is I'll just write the same thing again because it just seems like the next logical piece of information. And then I'll look and I had already written it. That's one of the problems with editing, actually, when you see things as almost like a pattern of how things fit together. I don't know if you know what I mean, but let's see. Oh, we're already over here. Maybe this too is not seeing with the right brain. See, these are not good sentences. I realize that. It's like, do I want to make them good? The ego self is actually inferior to what we can do in the manic state, where we aren't afraid to try and we're curious. So some of this overestimation could actually be lack of fear, right? Not worrying that we're unskilled in something, because you have to practice it in order to gain skill, right? So here is the ego self. Okay. We use the effect to our benefit. Where is the point where underestimating our abilities is more detrimental than overestimating them? Compared to mania, we need to inverse the Dunning-Kruger effect. I think we use the Dunning-Kruger effect to our advantage in mania. Because our brain is working faster and better, we actually can do things better than we previously thought. And we know it. That's why we try. So it's better to let the effect run wild. The normal state is far from optimal brain operation. So when people overestimate, perhaps they are unconsciously aware that they are being suppressed. All this calculation and predicting is from the prefrontal cortex, which goes hypofrontal. It turns off its false inferiority. Yeah. So I'm just saying that imagine reading this and being like, the tendency for unskilled individuals to overestimate their own ability. And then say you're not skilled in something. All of a sudden you're afraid to try because you think you have this terrible cognitive bias of the Dunning-Kruger effect. Like, I don't know, I just see a lot of these things as trying to instill fear or like, stay in your cage, blah, blah, all of that kind of stuff. Because this is what I did when I started reading this. I was like, oh, I don't know if this is any good, blah, blah, blah. I went over to ChatGPT, and this is where it gets kind of fun. So the Dunning-Kruger effect, the tendency for unskilled individuals to overestimate their own ability, and the tendency for experts to underestimate their own ability. So I wrote, based on this definition, can you create a term? Usually I create my own terms and ask for definitions. I know a definition, but it's a lot easier just to get ChatGPT to write it out. So can you create a term and definition for how in mania individuals tend to have skills and abilities out of the blue that they didn't know they had? So funny, I write it that way, but I kind of know which skills and abilities I have now. So initially you didn't know you had them, but when you know you have them, then you have them. But sometimes they're off and on because just like anything else, they're off and on. So here, it created the term Epiphanosis Effect. I like that. It's good. Definition: the tendency for individuals in mania to spontaneously access latent skills, abilities, or knowledge they previously did not realize they possessed, often with a sense of effortless mastery and conviction. Unlike the Dunning-Kruger effect, which involves miscalibration of skill perception, the Epiphanosis effect reflects a genuine but temporary unlocking of potential, where the brain appears to bypass self-doubt and limitation, leading to surprising displays of creativity, insight, or technical ability. While some of these abilities may be sustainable with practice, others may be fleeting or context dependent. So this is a great definition, I'll tell you that much. Like, I couldn't write this in a million years, but it makes complete sense. And it has all these pieces of things. This is the thing. I've written out most of this, but if I wanted to write a definition, like I've written out most of this separately in some way, shape, or form. But when I say I need a definition for a term, I can't put that together like that. I can create tons of context, but I can't, just I don't even know what that is. I don't even know. I can't do that. I can create the words. I've created a lot of words. I have a whole lexicon of them somewhere. I don't think I have it open. But here I'll show you that I do have this rules section that I was telling you about. Why rules? And then I have all these notes. Like, here's some possible rules. But so that's why I wanted to share that, because I think ChatGPT mentioned kind of rules, right? And I was going to create rules for being out and about in society and reality testing and things like that. So to continue, the word is derived from epiphany, sudden realization, and gnosis, knowledge, particularly intuitive or mystical knowing. Would you like to explore how this could fit into your framework of alternative ways of knowing? Sure, what do you have in mind? So again, it really is talking about guidance and meaningfulness for some reason. I like this. So I'm already having an insight into this, which is epiphanosis and as a manifestation of guidance. Because in here now, I have a whole section on guidance. And it's not well written, it's just kind of points and bits and pieces. But I'll probably just talk with ChatGPT about it or write to ChatGPT about it. It seems to want to talk about it with how much it keeps bringing it up. And epiphanosis, as well as other of these cognitive biases, are definitely part of guidance, right? And I don't know if they're cognitive biases or if it calls it an effect. They're probably effects. They're not really biases. So, yeah, meaningful without self-doubt interfering. There's not very much self-doubt in mania. I think that's what part of the mechanism is. And, to doubt something is to delay. It's to defer. It's to sort of step back and not do it in that exact instant. And then the instant has gone by. And so it's like missing out, and there's a lot to that. What else? Could certain training methods trigger it without mania? See, it totally gets it, right? Because I don't know why it's getting that part, but not some. It doesn't know the word re-uncovery, which is fine. I'm just curious how it knows this so well, because my thing is really training and practicing these things in daily life, not needing mania, that energy of mania, to bring it about. The energy of mania is sort of like to discover the capacity, but then how does one train the capacity after? Instead of waiting for more energy, which just comes in and allows us to discover the capacities again, but then the energy goes away and then we don't have the capacities. But there's got to be ways to train it, right? So this is a good question. I would ask this question, right? So I would see again, without hesitation, without delay, without deferring. That's the thing. And I'm not saying never act with hesitation, but we don't really have the practice capacity of not acting without hesitation. And or like with choiceless awareness or perception action, which is what Krishnamurti calls it. And he says also perception action doesn't necessarily mean, I see a butterfly and I run towards it hoping it'll land on my fingers, or my finger, I should say. But perceiving something and then it has an action on the brain cells that is different than if we are projecting information and knowledge onto the butterfly. So if I project a knowledge onto the butterfly, I might say, oh, that's a monarch, it's yellow, haven't seen a monarch in a while. But if I see the butterfly clearly without that projected knowledge, there could be a moment of awe or beauty, and that has an effect on the brain that is different than knowing what the butterfly is, or what color it is, what it's called, things like that. But that's what the brain's doing all the time, and it interferes with this other process. And not to say we don't need the process of knowledge, but there's a lot of times we don't need it. But our brain is always doing it, so we don't understand how detrimental that is. So let's see here. See here it says you've already explored how bipolar cognition lacks a wisdom tradition. So it's getting that from somewhere. I haven't said that in this box at chat. The Epiphanosis Effect suggests that mania taps into an emergent intelligence, one that is not built on incremental learning, but on spontaneous synthesis. So I like this, like there's this emergent intelligence of becoming aware of guidance, or however I said it before, I don't remember. Like these capacities of guidance and the way the brain changes in order to see in that way. This is a good point here. If people with mania access this effect, is it possible that other cognitive states, flow states, psychedelics, near death, do the same? And this is actually an interesting point, because I have compared mania to near-death experiences. Like it's pretty similar. It actually has a lot of overlap with near-death experiences. And I've had near-death experiences in mania. And, mania itself is sort of being near death of one's ego. It's so disengaged in a lot of ways that that one is completely different and experiences the world completely different. And that's not to say that a tangent ego doesn't develop with mania. It does. And that the regular ego isn't part of that. It is. There can be a lot of ego inflation, and maybe even more so because the regular ego isn't online as much. But to the point is that to think that mania might have some unique effects that are more obvious in mania that near-death experience or psychedelic states could be compared with. So the other way around. Maybe because they're more unique to mania or more pronounced, and one who may have had a near-death experience might say, yeah, it was kind of like that as well in the near-death experience, and then it adds to the wisdom around near-death experiences. Or it could be that the more people with mania say, hey, I process information this way, this way, this way, this way, it allows the eventual exploration of more nuances of mania to the point where it's like, wow, there's a lot of overlap with near-death experience or psychedelics, but without taking psychedelics, or also with the human potential movement or, positive psychology or what have you. So it could just invite like cross-referencing and seeing that there's value in these states as well. And, just as we were talking about the Pygmalion effect, how others see you has an effect on how you manifest. So the example of trying to sing in front of a crowd versus singing in the bathroom. Now, like for me, mania or accessing the traits and the abilities and a lot of the capacities that I first became acquainted with through mania, most of them happen in the privacy of my own space, like singing in the shower. But if I tried to utilize those out in public somehow, then it might not manifest as well, especially if I started with, I have bipolar disorder and I experience mania. And I've been in the hospital 6 times in the last 10 years, So, I don't know. That's why for me it starts with a private practice until the Pygmalion effect can be overcome. So we were talking about this now, though. There's re-uncovery. Look at this. Epiphanotic abilities. Could structured post-mania reflection help identify with epiphanotic abilities are sustainable versus fleeting? Help identify which epiphanotic abilities are sustainable versus fleeting. So then what is epiphanosis again? Right, so within epiphanosis are skills, abilities, knowledge, right? And then re-uncovery is a way to move towards mastering some of them. So I had a lot of different ones in my first mania. See, what I like is I just talked about, by talking about the Dunning-Kruger effect through this somewhere. I always lose it. Oh, here. So we were talking about it here. And I was talking about the video of my skating and how it went away, right? And like without remembering that it said this over here. I didn't actually read this definition before. I was just like, whoa. It says in the definition that some might be fleeting or context dependent, and some might be sustainable with practice. If you think this is weird, you can compare it to how some people have an experience where they hit their head or something, and then when they recover, They can play the piano fluently, and they couldn't before. Maybe they were unskilled, you know. So this just really challenges the definition of being unskilled, and what is it that makes a person skilled? Is it a hit on the head? Is it practice? Is it overestimating? Or are there people who, no matter how much they overestimate, that overestimation is not going to help them become skilled? You know, so I wanted to compare that to, it's a little bit like a quantum whack on the head, where you have some sort of quantum abilities. I'm just calling them quantum, meaning possible. And there's research coming out now that there's quantum effects on the everyday level. So it's not as misguided to use that word as science wants us to think. Again, trying to make us think that we're just these linear Newtonian creatures that are just like billiard balls. But we're quantum creatures for sure. So so I was talking about that, how whereas the channeling, the ability to channel, that came back. So I first was channeling and writing stuff down, kind of like automatic writing. I was just writing and writing all these insights. And then they didn't come through for 3 years until I started to write things down again. And then it took on a life of its own at some points. So it was like, maybe if I would have skated more, I would have gotten better at that, but I didn't. Maybe that ability is still there. But what I'm trying to say is there's a lot of different latent skills and abilities that come online. It's almost like having a interview with your possible self in Mania. But it's like a pragmatic, experiential interview where it's like, I don't know if you ever watched Mad TV back in the day, but there's a character named Stuart. It's like, look what I can do. Look what I can do. And Mania is kind of like that. It's like, look what you can do. Look what you can do. Look what you can do. But you can't do all of it. You got to choose, like, or the abilities will choose you. It actually might be more like that. It might be the universe trying things on through you as a way to improvise and get some kind of measurable feedback to see how the situation responds. Imagine one day there's no Pygmalion effect against these types of epiphanotic abilities. And then if a person gets the energy, they're able to access a lot of different latent skills, abilities, and knowledge. Like maybe they just stay online and the situation is such that people get to pop into their best self when they have a mania. They like literally, like if somebody gets hit on the head and they become like a savant in some way, imagine the universe just gives the energy for a person to all of a sudden be their best self. Just like that person became an element of their best self, like with one skill, say piano playing. Imagine becoming your best self in all skills that are yours, including things like channeling or telepathy or non-ordinary skill sets as well. Like, why not? If it can happen for people who, I've seen people who have some kind of something happen and then they have an accent from a different country that they never lived in, so there's a lot going on. And that's the thing, is to make or to facilitate having the energy such that there's no Pygmalion effect that just, basically squashes us when we're flowering and pulverizes us back into the dirt, I think that could happen. Like imagine it's like a rebirth and like all of a sudden somebody's their best self like overnight and their friendship is like, oh yay, I can't wait till it happens to me. Like, wouldn't that be sort of like Christification almost? Or I don't know what that would be. Actually, that would be a good question to ask. What is the definition of that? What is, let's see. We'll probably end with that. Let's see. Oh my gosh, that's funny. Could we design learning environments that replicate the Epiphanosis effect without the instability of mania? So what I was just saying is, could we facilitate the environment of the world? Right now it's to create left brain successes, or, say famous people in the entertainment industry and different things like that. But what if it was such that basically people would just have this epiphanosis effect and it be stable? If this happens, there's no mania. It's just people being their best selves in the world designed for people to be their best self. Like, it's not really magical. It actually could be that people who are able to do this, like to have a learning environment to replicate this or whatever other effects, and allow people to harvest, harness, practice, and embody their mania to the point where it's not mania, they're just their best self. They're using it as what I call reverse engineering self-actualization. Then people around them might start to really flower as well with the reverse Pygmalion effect. So that's something to look up. So again, we're using these cognitive biases to give us clues about how the mind is working in mania, and how to adapt. So where's the Pygmalion? So it's kind of talking about a reverse Pygmalion effect. So this would be like a compersion type effect, when you really I'm just going to make a note to myself. So I'm seeing that these cognitive biases are quite good for getting a lot of the nuance of this consciousness. I don't remember what I was going to ask. I might just have to watch the end of the video to see. See, for me, this is more engaging than just editing it. And, maybe all of a sudden I'll stop and just sit and edit it too. But let's see. Let's see here. Yeah, I'm gonna have to look at the video to know what I asked, because I don't remember. That's part of it. Yeah, so this is good. But the trouble with this approach is that, basically, just from this one paragraph, mostly just this one paragraph, maybe another paragraph, I created an hour of talking, right? So, but maybe that's what I need to do at this point, is to expand rather than contract, or try to get it concise, or just edit this stuff. If I just added this stuff that I wrote 3 years ago or 2 years ago at least, It's got to be 3 by now. Then it's like I'm going back to the past. Whereas if I utilize ChatGPT, then I'm bringing it into the future, especially when I'm able to ask for a definition of that. So one other definition, let's see here. Let's see what it says. Galatee inversion. Oh. Named after Galatee, the statue in Greek mythology that came to life through its own essence. Probably call it the Galatee Effect rather than inversion. I like this. This isn't what I was thinking. I was actually thinking of compersion, where you uplift others with your thoughts and your vision. But this is sort of a good step before it, where you are able to be of your own essence or flower of your own essence despite the external stuff, because you kind of have to do that. And then once you do that, you can look upon others with compersion. But the day where enough people are looking on each other with compersion is a ways away. So that's good. See? Something unexpected. Like a missing step. And I would never have known about this Galatee thing. So, self-fulfilling prophecy. I don't really like the word belief, because like when we're thinking about natural processes, does a flower need to believe in itself in order to flower? No. So this whole belief thing is sort of human created, and I think it gets in the way, because a belief is coming from the past, and so is the self. So anyways, we'll go into that later. Thanks for staying with me on this. Peace out.